On a Friday afternoon in January, Doug Gillingham and Dana Freehoff jumped on the North County-bound coaster in Old Town. They were heading back to Solana Beach after a long day of bike riding. They gladly paid the $6.50 fare for their train ride home.
I like supporting mass transit. It's a public benefit.
But these days, riders like Gillingham and others who pay their fares on the coaster and Sprinter have steadily decreased. Since 2023, about a third of coaster riders and more than half of Sprinter riders were fare evaders, according to a KPBS analysis of North County Transit District ridership data. This is a stark change from just a decade ago. Sean Donaghy is the Transit District's CEO. He acknowledges they're behind the curve in addressing the problem.
When we don't have systems set up like a BART does, or a New York Transit, or DC, where you tap to get into the area to make sure that that fare is valid, it's very difficult for our frontline employees to manage that.
He largely blames an erosion of basic civic values for the surging fare evasion rates.
I think there was a sense of ownership by the riders to pay that fare and do those things. I think the temperature has changed a little bit on what people feel compelled to feel like they can get away with.
Regardless of the reason why, the impact on the district is significant. It lost upwards of $4.4 million from fare evasion last year.
It does sound like it's a little bit out of control. I think that's the big thing, and they're losing a lot of money.
That's Philip Plotch, a researcher and senior fellow at the Eno Center for Transportation, a Washington, D.C. think tank. Fare revenues covered less than 8% of the district's operating costs in the most recent fiscal year. That's down from 22% a decade ago. If this downward trend continues, the district might have to cut back on service to the millions of people who rode its trains in the last fiscal year. Plotch says transit agencies nationwide are suffering from shrinking revenue following the pandemic.
But for the most part, we have transit systems that are still operating because of the generosity of the taxpayers.
In North County, the drastic drop in fare revenues coincides with a hands-off fare enforcement approach the district has established in recent years. Donaghy calls it an inform, not enforce policy.
If someone chooses to not pay that fare, we do not intervene at that moment for the safety of the employee.
This approach contrasts with an earlier era, when the district cracked down on fare evasion and code compliance inspectors wrote citations. Fare evasion dropped to less than 2% on the coaster and Sprinter in 2011, according to an agency document uncovered by KPBS. However, a more detailed analysis of how enforcement impacts fare evasion isn't possible. That's because the agency couldn't produce records prior to 2021. Donaghy acknowledged the revenue losses from fare evasion impact operations.
Unfortunately, we're losing out on potential expansion by not having that additional fare revenue.
But Donaghy says the district's hands are tied.
Yes, we need to make sure that we're collecting fare and managing our fiscal responsibility, but also making sure that our employees feel like they're in a space where they're not going to be physically assaulted or harassed over $2.50.
Plotch believes the district's fare evasion challenges could be combated with a combination of education, engineering, and enforcement. He points to the Metropolitan Transit System in San Diego, which increased enforcement last year. The Union Tribune reported that the agency's fare revenue increased by $500,000 a month.
So getting more inspectors and police out there not only is raising revenue, but it's making it safer for passengers. And that is probably going to increase passenger revenue even more.
In North County, the district is currently conducting surveys to determine if fares should increase in order to combat expected budget shortages in the future. Elaine Alfaro, KPBS News.